Still setting up. All right, Ryan, you want to go ahead and let everyone in? Dr. Johnson, do you mind going to that first slide with the housekeeping? Okay, we need to get removed. It's all right, I can say what it was.
Place I had suggested, is that called Firebirds?
Oh, you see it up top, that first one. Yep. All right, thank you all for joining us. We're going to get started in just a couple seconds. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening. My name is Janelle Drake, and I'll be facilitating the COVID-19 virtual town hall event tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're going to get started shortly, but before we hop in, we want to go over just a few housekeeping rules. So we ask that you please keep your settings on mute to help us reduce background noise and just ensure that everyone is able to hear all of the important information that's going out tonight. If you have any questions, you'll notice that in the chat, you're able to chat to a couple of folks, but we do ask that you send your questions to Janelle Drake, which is myself. And also just a reminder that we are streaming live on the Hamilton County Schools YouTube channel. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We have Dr. Brian Johnson, who is the superintendent of Hamilton County Schools. We also have Dr. Stephen Adams, who is our medical director with CHI Memorial. We have Marisa Moyer, who is our school health manager. We also have Ryan Ledford, who is our COVID-19 fellow. And we are also joined by Jen Bronson, who is our chief of staff. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Johnson.
Hey, well, good afternoon. Appreciate you all taking time and, continuing to help us and support us and hear from us as we continue to navigate the pandemic. Obviously, the last week and a half, probably 3 weeks or so, there's continued to be change and movement in regards to how the pandemic has progressed, and we want to just kind of share our plans in regards to where we are. We always start with children and trying to make sure that all children thrive and experience a future without limits. And if we just turn the table back to last year, we know that we were able to be on campus 90% of the time or offer an on-campus option approximately 90% of the time, and did all we could as a community, we believe, to really try to make a very abnormal situation and bring as much normalcy to that as absolutely possible. As the year went forward, our state legislature went into a special session and began to have conversation and dialogue about, obviously return and how we support our students Our commitment was to make sure that we were on campus, which obviously was there. One of the things that they asked all districts to do, was a requirement for all districts to do last year, was to have a continuous learning plan. That plan allowed districts to really have an alternative to pivot to if on-campus learning was not an option. When they went into that special session, when they came out of their regular session, they made the determination that in essence, continuous learning plans are only available in the case that there is a stated or declared state of emergency by the governor, in which state there are several steps that have to be taken. Obviously, the state of emergency has to disrupt traditional operations, in particular, specifically in regards to schools. And if that's the case, we have to provide notice to the State Department, and they have to grant permission for us to pivot to a continuous learning plan. So really all that legislation basically says is that remote and hybrid days and options do not count towards our 180 days. And so the on-campus, which was a commitment for us, will be and is the expectation from the state level. So in regards to our mitigation strategies, just to give a bit of an update around that, we know that on yesterday, the health department made the recommendation and strongly recommended that all individuals wear masks in school settings. That mimics the CDC guidance that was provided, and also the American Academy of Pediatrics. So our stance, obviously, when we have health professionals that are making recommendations, that we will strongly recommend that all individuals 2 years and older wear face covering. That's the same expectation of the health department, as well as the same guidance from the CDC and the AAP. So that strong recommendation does remain and exist for us in compliance or in alignment with what the health department has recommended. While in school, obviously, this is a bit of an adjustment, as I think more has been learned about the pandemic. Obviously, initially it was 6 feet apart in schools. That's very, very tough. We are more and more research has been done over time. And so now the guidance is 3 feet. We're going to do that whenever possible, wherever we can, whenever we can. We want to make sure that we're in tune to that 3 feet of distancing that's there, as is directed by the CDC. In regards to the hygiene and disinfecting components, we'll continue to do as much of the enhanced cleaning as we possibly can, at disinfecting and all those steps, mitigation steps that we took last year. And the washing of hands, the covering, your mouths when you cough or sneeze, the sanitizing of hands, et cetera. Those things will continue to be critical for us and to us as we go forward in the navigation of this pandemic, and will be the strategies that we implement as we step into this school year. And then we all know, and I know that Dr. Abt speaks this much better than I can, but the vaccination is the number one defense against COVID-19. And if there are questions in regards to that, please feel free to reach out to us at HCS COVID response team at hcd.org. We know the students that are 12 and under, 12 and over, or not just students, but children 12 and over, have the ability to access the vaccine if so chosen. So for our employees, that has been a focus for us and all of our adults. And speaking to our employees right now, about 68.7% of our teachers are at least partially vaccinated or down the line towards their second vaccination. And in Hamilton County, and this is one of the challenges that we know exist and persist, we have about 42.5% of our residents that are vaccinated. So we are pretty proud of the way in which our employees are taking advantage of the vaccine. Probably heard a good bit about the opportunities that we provided throughout the course of the second semester, not really throughout the course, but in particular in the spring and into the early summer, and are continuing to provide for our employees that are choosing to be vaccinated. In regards to communication, contact tracing, in accordance with CDC, has been a continued requirement. It is a continued requirement, and we'll do that in partnership with the Hamilton County Health Department. Asymptomatic vaccinated individuals do not need to quarantine. Again, that's guidance directly from the CDC. And individualized quarantine letters will continue to live in Power School, and those will be shared with you. And we have those in an English and a Spanish version. In regards to notification of positive cases, instead of the phone call out, it will be available on our website every day. We'll identify the school, and this is a screenshot of essentially what that will look like. One of the goals we had last year was to be as transparent as possible, and we want to continue that effort as we go forward in dealing with this, as we know this is upon us this year. Bear in mind that obviously, in order to close a school, we would have to use a stockpile day, but in truth, we don't anticipate, nearly the amount of school closures or disruptions, but we will always communicate where a positive case may exist. On our webpage, we will track daily trends, and we will share those. Obviously, the information from the Hamilton County Health Department, as well as hospitalization, ICU, and teacher and student absences, et cetera. We will display active cases on our district COVID dashboard, so you will be able to see how our active cases are trending. And what's transpiring in regards to that. We will update a daily list of schools where there are new cases. You will have access to that. We'll make that very, very clear. And we'll maintain our employee vaccination dashboard. That dashboard has been up, and we'll continue to just share how the vaccination is progressing internally for us as a school district with our employees. We will not use the phase tracker. Again, we transitioned away from that during probably the midpoint of the second semester. And obviously, because of the new legislation, the continued learning plan will not be something that we operate with. In regards to our school events, athletic events, all athletic and extracurricular events will be at full capacity for now. Actually, the TSSAA came out with a recommendation a couple of days ago that school districts and teams follow the recommendation of the CDC. So our biggest challenge going forward will be to really continue as a community that's at the events, and personally as a person that loves high school events in general and school events in general, to make sure that we're doing all we can to mitigate against the spread of this virus. So families and households, we're encouraging you to sit together. When possible, we ask you to distance. Obviously, we recommend face covering for anyone that's not vaccinated. And then all those things with washing hands and covering coughs, and then we'll continue the contact tracing that's necessary. Open house will take place. We'll do some more things with sign in and try to make sure that we're mindful of lingering beyond 15 minutes. And whether there are outdoor options to do things, obviously, as we continue to navigate the pandemic, we want to continue to take advantage of that. And we'll monitor what happens and transpires in regards to our events and such, and any adjustments that we need to make, we will. But this is the plan as we begin this school year. And so again, I know a lot of information that was shared. I want to give the balance of the time for you all to ask questions and to hear from the experts that we have, and obviously for us to answer anything that we can. Just so you know, we have continued our reopening task force and also our teacher and leader feedback groups, advisory groups, and we'll convene them again on Monday and continue towards the preparation of school. And any additional information that we need to share, we'll make available post in those conversations. So at this time, Janelle, I'll turn back to you, and we'll open up the floor to any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thank you guys for sending in your questions. And just as a reminder, we're going to try to get to all of the questions that we can. If we do not get to your question, we will have an opportunity to capture those. So our first question is asking about water fountains in our schools and if those will be open and will students have access to them.
Yeah, so that's a great question. You want to jump in on that? I know you've been talking to Justin Robertson about that quite a bit.
Yes, they have been open for summer school, and we anticipate that those will stay open into the new school year. We haven't seen any issues over the summer, but of course, as all of our mitigation strategies from last year, we would continue to recommend that if you can send your child with a water bottle, please do that.
Thank you. We also have another question around, is there a chance that all students and staff will eventually be required to wear masks?
You know what we're really looking to, and I think Dr. Adams can give a great medical context on this. We're really looking to medical professionals to help guide us in regards to, what steps we should take in regards to, the requirement of masks. Obviously, as of yesterday, the local health department strongly recommended that students are in masks or in face coverings, and so our strong recommendation is that I would really defer to Dr. Adams just to, and maybe Dr. Adams, you can give some context about. I think it'd be good for everybody to hear about this variant and from a medical standpoint, what you see or what we know in regards to it.
Yeah, so just as a little background, I was happily going through the entire summer thinking we're not going to have to deal with the mask thing, that we're going to get vaccination levels up high enough and the variants aren't going to be as big as a deal as some worried. But the truth is the Delta variant is here. It's much more contagious. Our number of positive cases per day is 10 times higher than it was a month ago. The number of patients in Chattanooga area hospitals is 4 times higher than it was a month ago. And a notice went out today to medical professionals saying, hey, Chattanooga area hospitals are hitting the limits on bed availability. And that's a lot of that's not necessarily because of COVID, but because we run a tight situation on a good day where there's not 100 empty beds in Chattanooga to fill with COVID patients. So which way things go over the next week, 2 or 3 weeks will determine what else we need to do. But I would say all options are on the table at this point.
Thank you. We also have a question about notification of COVID cases. Have someone asking, will we be notified when a case of COVID breaks out in our school, or do we have to check the website every day to find out?
Yeah, so our initial thought on that is to post it on the website every day. We actually are going to meet with principals on Monday, and we're going to talk more deeply about what their thoughts are around this and preferences, and so look for more information on that. What we know factually is that we'll definitely post it on the website every single day. And then anything beyond that, we're going to talk to principals and talk with principals about. So anticipate more around that.
Okay, next question is, what is going to be the procedure when a student tests positive for COVID? Will they be able to do their work from home?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Obviously, they will be in quarantine. Schools will work to have, alternative assignments for them to be able to participate in and with. One of the things we'll be working through, and Jen will be working through with Nikki and the board around is some requirement for policy specifically around when students are in quarantine and how their learning continues. So yes, absolutely, they will. We'll make accommodations. We'll get them as many of the resources as they're filling up to completing. We want to make sure that obviously they're filling up to it first, and obviously if they're not, we'll work with them when they get back around getting caught up. But we absolutely will make work available and continuing to move them forward academically.
Okay, the next question is for kids needing speech therapy. It can be important to see facial movements as part of learning how to make sounds correctly. Will provisions be made to assist kids with this special need?
I think that's a great question. I don't know if Mitzi Delker, our special ed director, is on here. I want to make sure I give way to her expertise around that. I can speak to what I know. I don't know that she's on here, but what I will speak to is that absolutely what we know in general with our special ed students is it's a population that we have to be really intentional with and about. I mean, it's probably no secret I was a special ed teacher myself, so that's a near and dear place in my heart specifically. And so yes, in regards to speech therapy, we're going to do everything we can in regards to facial movements, et cetera, to make sure that that students have that opportunity. And many of our teachers went to that were in those types of situations. Transition to face coverings that allowed students to see those movements if they chose to be in a face covering. Okay, so you have to remember that our recommendation is to be in a face covering, and so those are things we will still continue to encourage as we are as thoughtful as possible with serving the population of students, in particular around speech and language.
Okay, I have a question about divider screens. Will they be used in classrooms or during lunch?
Yeah, most of our principals have access to, last year, I hate to say we made an investment in divider screens, but that's what it ended up being. We ended up spending some relief dollars specifically for that, because as I mentioned earlier, the 6 feet apart in a classroom it's almost impossible. I'm sure we've got some teachers on here that can attest to it. It's almost impossible, and that's one of the things that we know there's an adjustment been made in regards to 3 feet. But most of our schools, all of our schools, have some level of access to those dividers, and we continue to add to that as the school year went forward. So they're in good shape to be able to use those as needed.
I have a question about the COVID tests that we use. So Jen, this may be a question for you. Are there different tests for the variant and COVID-19?
At this time, the test that we'll be offering in our schools won't allow to test for the variant. So we use a rapid antigen test. It's a 15-minute turnaround, and the test is performed by the school nurse. So we don't have the capacity as a school district to test for the variant.
Thank you. And I'm getting a lot of questions around our rationale here around not requiring the masks versus recommending the masks. So could either of you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, we're following the health department guidance around the strong recommendation. CDC guidance says to recommend. CDC guidance is a recommendation. The health department is a strong recommendation. Ours is a strong recommendation as well.
Thank you.
I would say medically, if we get good compliance from people voluntarily doing it, then you don't have to go another step of essentially going to war with the small group that feels strongly in the other direction. It really depends on which way it goes. I think the thing that everyone agrees with is that in-person learning is the best option, and we should do everything possible to keep that in place. So that's really where the mindset is.
Thank you. I have another question. Since elementary students cannot be vaccinated, will there be quarantine for any positive case or close contact? Is there any thought about allowing COVID days for faculty and staff?
Read that question again, because I think it had 2 parts. I want to make sure
Yes, there are a couple in there. So with elementary students not able to be vaccinated, and if they were to catch COVID and a staff person has an elementary school student, would they have some recourse there? So would they get some days or some flexibility there to take off? Oh,
you're talking about our staff?
Yes, this is from our staff person.
Yeah. So, obviously with and we'll have, let me start by saying this. We're going to have some guidance, so to speak, for our staff that'll be available at some point next week. Right now, unfortunately, it's not the case. When the federal government had done some things to allow for some COVID leave and opportunities last year at the height of it, and unless that changes, we don't have the ability, right, to be able to do that. Now, there's obviously access to sick leave, et cetera, just as normal. But at this point, that's we're just operating within the confines of what we have, and so that wouldn't be an option as far as COVID dates.
Okay, and I have a question about student learning while they're on quarantine. So will teachers be Zooming with students who are on quarantine?
Yeah, not necessarily. One of the challenges, and I'm just going to be very frank about this for and I'm speaking as a parent superintendent here. One of the true challenges for our teachers last year, in large part, and I'll lift it up a level. The pandemic was incredibly taxing on everybody, and still is incredibly taxing on everybody, if I could speak very candidly, and it pushed everybody, parents, teachers, schools, health, professionals, to the limit in regards to just trying to determine how to respond. One of the, but a final point on what happened in the classroom, we ended up with teachers that had a foot in the day-to-day instruction of the student in the classroom, and a foot in the instruction of, students, multiple students, many times that were virtual. And that is immensely challenging to make sure that that learning is taking place, and that all students are mastering the work. So I think you will see across our district some situations where teachers may pivot to doing a dual type of approach. But in general, I would anticipate us treating it very similar to we would if it were the flu or strep throat or something to that effect. And, a student's out, and then when a student gets back, we work to really be intense and get that student as caught up as we absolutely can. And so that's what I think you're going to see more of. I do know, and I heard today there are teachers, teachers do an amazing job that they're already preparing and thinking about this reality. And so a lot was learned last year that I think will allow teachers to do some of those things, where it's appropriate. But please know, in full disclosure and transparency, that that adds a layer of complexity that's immensely challenging. And so we want to try to get to the other side of this pandemic, hopefully, as soon as we can.
Thank you. And I believe we've covered this already, but I want to address it since this is a recent question we're getting in. How long will the quarantine be for a positive case identified in a class?
I'll let Marissa or Jane speak to that.
Go ahead, Marissa.
Hello. The quarantine for a positive student will be 10 days at home. And then on the 11th day, they can return to school if their symptoms are such and they're not running a fever for 24 hours, they can return to school. So it's still going to be the 10-day quarantine. Positive students cannot test out. They have to do the full 10-day quarantine and return on day 11.
Thank you. All right, and Ryan, we have a question for you. Will buildings still be sprayed after a positive case?
And Jen, feel free to jump in on this, but after the notification of a positive case, the building will be cleaned by the staff member with a special machine that will disinfect and sanitize the building where the student was at. So if the student was in the lunchroom, the gymnasium, and class 204, then we'll make sure to target the areas that the student was at.
Thank you. I have a question. Will principals have the autonomy to require masks outside of district guidelines? No.
The district guideline around that is that strongly encouraged, and that's strongly recommended, and that's the guidance. And let's speak to where that's coming from again in full transparency. I know there was some back and forth towards the end of the year last year around masks and such, and so we talked and worked with principals, and we'll continue to because principals are, and I've said often during my tenure, they're the most critical hires that we're involved with at the district level because they set the culture and tone of the building, right? I think to Dr. Adams's point, what we recognize is that we are entering, once again, a pretty pivotal point in regards to how we approach this pandemic. And we can either choose collectively as a community to approach it from the standpoint of deferring to expertise, or we can approach it from the standpoint of, we're going to do what we think is best. And the honest truth is, when we have medical experts that have gone to school for, medicine, I look to defer to them in regards to how we approach things. Somebody's got a dog they're trying to get squared away, but we absolutely we absolutely recognize that again, this is a challenging moment. But just as we navigate, I was telling Jen Bronson and I were talking about this earlier today. We've been and seen tougher, and so I say unfortunately we kind of know what to do. It's a matter of us doing what we need to do collectively as a community.
Thank you. And this is another question that I believe we've already covered, but I have a couple of them. If there is a positive case in a classroom, does the entire class have to quarantine? And I'll direct that to Jen.
So just as last year, we'll follow our quarantine guidelines for contact tracing. So we'll essentially draw a 6-foot circle around that student, that positive student or staff person. And anybody that was exposed to him or her for 15 total minutes or more will be put on that close contact list. So not necessarily the entire class is the answer to the question.
Thank you. Now I'm going to direct this to Dr. Adams. Could you just speak in general about the Delta variant and what should parents know about this?
Sure. So first of all, the resurgence of COVID-19 via the Delta variant is an epidemic among the unvaccinated. So if you've had a vaccine, any of them, they're all effective, and Pfizer and Moderna are particularly effective. And when we say effective, we mean to prevent severe disease. So it is possible that even though you've been vaccinated, you may come down with the Delta variant. But if that illness is 3 or 4 days of cough and runny nose, then the vaccine worked and everybody's happy. The only downside is you might be sharing the virus with people around you, which is a reason to quarantine if you get symptoms. The Delta variant has swept through other countries. The United Kingdom is one, if you're interested in reading about. It could be a prediction of what we're going to see, which, because it's more easily spread, it tends to spread faster. It's not any more deadly than the previous versions of COVID, but it does spread faster because of its increased infectivity. But really, the answer to what to do with it is the same thing that we do with any other of the variants, which is reduce exposure, isolate people who have the disease or have been exposed, and push vaccinations. And if we can get the vaccination rate higher in Hamilton County, and maybe a few of the people who don't want it get COVID and recover from it, it's not going to be an issue for us. But right now we've got a low enough rate in the community of people who are immune, either through having the disease or having been vaccinated, that we're likely to have a pretty significant outbreak.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Adams. I have a question about virtual school for students, and will that still be an option?
So we have a virtual school that is still an option for any parent or family that's interested in that for their child. and I'm happy to make that connection. Ms. Kelly Kofelt, and we'll put it in the chat box direct email for that school so that you've got access to that if that is of interest to you. But yes, now HCS at home, obviously, again, because of the continuous learning plan, is not an option. So you won't have that dual modality in which we are offering virtual. The virtual school is an option.
Thank you. I also have a question about school lunch. Are students going to be allowed to eat lunch in the cafeteria again?
Yes, the plan will absolutely be for students to eat lunch in the cafeteria.
And this is a shameless plug here. School lunch will be free for all students for 1 more year.
Yes. Okay, this may be a question to Jen or Ryan. Have air cleaners been installed in schools, or do we have open windows to get good air cleaning?
Ryan?
Yep. So every school is different, but one of the mitigation strategies that's a strong use of school assets is opening windows and doors whenever possible. So one of the things is, is it safe to open the window, as long as it's not inclement weather, using fans strategically. So you can put a fan in front of a window and that'll increase the ventilation. So every school building is different, but they are maximizing the assets that they have to increase the ventilation.
And I want to just be abundantly clear. There are some buildings that did not have the ability to open their windows, like we just speak truth. And candidly, we've got some old buildings, some older buildings that do not have the capacity to do that. And so that's in truth and transparency, that is a challenge that we'll have to continue to navigate. As Ryan mentioned, the hydrostatic misters for any positive situation is something that we'll leverage in cases where there are positive cases and such. But I think to Ryan's point, where those strategies can be implemented, they will be. But there are places that they cannot, and we recognize that.
And last year, I'll just add that last year we saw a little bit of a trend, a tiny trend forming that our self-contained exceptional education classrooms were seeing a little bit more spread. So we did go ahead and invest in air filtration systems for all of those classrooms. And it did seem to be an effective mitigation strategy.
Thank you. I have another question about parents with students that are eligible to receive the vaccine. So this would be to you, Dr. Adams. What would you say to your patients with children that are eligible to receive the vaccine if they're feeling uncomfortable or unsure about that?
The vaccines have been shown to be safe. Millions and millions of doses have been given. Compared to other things, like even the oral polio vaccine that completely changed the face of illness in the United States and across the world, it's many, many times safer than that. I hear a lot of people say, well, the chances of my 15-year-old or 18-year-old or 20-year-old getting severe illness are pretty low, but it's not zero. And I think one of the things that we're going to see as we go further along in the pandemic is the 65 and older crowd has listened, and they have fairly high vaccination rates. So many of us early on in the pandemic would hear, oh, so-and-so's mother or grandmother passed away. The numbers of deaths are going to be lower. Medical treatment has gotten better. There's new drugs available. But I think what will be striking in the next 6 or 12 months is that people will say, oh, did you know that George's brother, who's only 38, passed away last week of COVID? Isn't it a shame he didn't get a vaccine? So the risk in the unvaccinated younger population is lower, but it's not zero. So I still strongly would encourage it. I don't know any physicians who don't feel like this is a good option. And certainly I pushed my own children to get it as soon as they possibly could.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. I do have a question. This will be for either Jen or Ryan. I have a parent that wants to know how do we plan to maintain the 3 feet of distance? Will we do that with assigned seats? And also what will that look like in the cafeterias during lunch?
Yeah, so last year, Ryan and I did a lot of school walks to work with our school principals and teachers to help them maximize the space within their classroom and get creative with how to restructure things like centers and little library corners or whatnot. So we will get creative, but the reality of the situation is that the classrooms have 4 walls and they can't be moved. So we will maximize our distancing to the extent that we can, but we have to lead with the policy aim of keeping our kids in school. And we will social distance to the extent that that's possible. Our cafeterias are large. It'll give us some more opportunities to spread out, but when it comes to the classroom, we just have to get creative. And our teachers certainly did that last year.
Hey, Janelle, you might want to remind, you may have put this in the chat box. I can't see, I haven't looked at the chat box, but just how people can ask questions. I see some hands up on my part of the screen, and I just want to make sure people know how they can submit questions and that we're going to be sure to capture questions. Let me say this to the last question, maybe as we're popping that in there. To be abundantly clear, obviously 6 feet was tough, right? 3 feet will be tough. Our teachers and staff and leaders do as great a job as they possibly can, but I want to be fully transparent. We're not going to be 3 feet all the time. Like there's just not a real way to be able to do that in a school. So, what we saw, to Jen's point, or school leaders thinking about how they, I'll use Udoa High as an example. Udoa High last year had their cafeteria. They used the gym as a second cafeteria so that they could spread students out. And so those types of things, to an extent, will still be in play. But I do want to be abundantly clear that, if you ask your child, were you 3 feet apart? If I ask my 9-year-old, were you 3 feet apart away from everybody today? The answer I can probably expect is no, not at all times, right? And so that's just a reality. We want to be as intentional as we can about being thoughtful about how we, keep students apart within the confines of what's been safe there.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. I did place in the chat that if you do have questions that we were unable to get to during this meeting, we do have a form to capture those. So please submit those to us there. I do have a question about the rationale, but behind 3 feet versus 6 feet. So I don't know, Dr. Johnson Dr. Adams, or maybe Jen could speak to that.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Adams speak to the medical side. I want to be clear that the CDC guidance was updated, right, to state 3 feet versus 6 feet. So that's in accordance with CDC guidance. That's not the school district pivoting that guidance. And Dr. Adams, you might could give some medical context behind that pivot.
Yeah, so those recommendations came out of the balancing what is practical within school systems versus what is reasonable for disease prevention or mitigation. So, if you think of it this way, if someone had Ebola, you'd say how much distance is enough? For me, I want it to be about 100 yards, right? Well, that's not practical. 6 feet turned out to be more than most school systems could handle, and it looks like the modeling says that 3 is reasonable. So you've got a lot of national experts that have put time and thought and study into that, and have come up with what is essentially a compromise. And you see a lot of that within the guidelines. If you've not gone to the AAP website and read it, it's a good quick read, and I'd encourage all of you to look at it.
Thank you. And then our last question for the night is asking, are we going to capture all of the questions? And absolutely, yes, we are. I'm going to save what we have here in the chat, and then we will also review any questions that are submitted to the form that we shared to review and have those for reference. Dr. Johnson or anyone else on the panel have anything before we close out?
Yeah, I think absolutely. School systems have been put in an incredibly tough position of being at the intersection of dealing with a global pandemic and trying to educate. This year, our commitment is to really lean in and focus on the teaching and learning, right, as a first priority. And obviously the health and safety is always at the core. And there is a lot of deference having to be given to what medical professionals are telling us to do. My hope, even as I transition away, is that this conversation is depoliticized and that we really lean in on what experts are telling us and try to band together to do the very, very best we can to overcome this and get to the other side of it. And I'll speak candidly, people are passionate about this on all sides because you're parents, as I am, and we always appreciate the passion and the advocacy. Know that our goal always is to do what is absolutely in the best interest, but then also trying to balance the reality that we are running a school district that is meant to be focused on student achievement. And so we really are trying to get to our absolute core business. I know I'm getting a chance to glance in my personal chat here, and there are concerns that issues aren't being addressed, and know that our whole goal here on this conversation is to have a conversation and to answer what we know. I think as we started out talking early in the year, last year, we said there are things that we just do not know. And if we knew how the Delta variant was going to play out, I promise you, we would be leaning all the way into to that whole bit, but we just don't know. So 3 words we elevated last year: grace, fluidity, and choice. And please show us grace and we'll give grace. Know that this is a fluid situation. And we've attempted to thoughtfully provide as much choice as possible. Let's continue to work together as a community to overcome this. Know that we're absolutely doing the very best we can. So thank you for giving of your time. We'll continue to keep you updated. There will be more that we'll continue to share. We have captured your questions. We know there are those that are immensely there are those that are locked into a corner on this either way, and we're focused on children who are in the middle. So let's continue to stay committed to focus on children, and we look forward to seeing them back in buildings on August the 12th. All right. Have an absolutely great evening. And Janelle, if there's nothing else, our goal, I want to be fully transparent, our goal will be, depending on the hundreds of millions of questions we get, we're going to try to get something up to you, up and available by the end of next week, for sure, if not early the next week. But you can expect some more information from us and guidance during next week. Do we say was it next Friday or Monday, Jan? Next Monday.
Next Thursday, we'll send it.
Next Thursday. Yep. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Hope that you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.